knows that we'll be recording today's webinar. Hi, Snell, you can turn your video off. We see you. Sonal, can you turn your video off, please? There we go. Hi, I'm Mimi Lufkin, CEO Emerita at the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity Education Foundation. It's my pleasure to be here with you today to open up today's I'm STEM network meeting. We have some great presenters with us today. I'm very excited about today's presentation. I'm looking forward to learning more from everyone. And I also want to say that I really appreciate all of you who are joining us today. I know that the world is a little bit upside down at the moment and that we're all having to deal with issues around COVID-19 and school shutting down and all kinds of things related to that. So thank you for taking time to be with us today. I think you'll find this to be a very valuable hour. First of all, let me say that there are some housekeeping items I'd like to cover with you before we get started. And you'll notice in your control panel that we have a chat function. So for today's meeting, if you have any questions, comments, etc., that you would like to put out there for all of us to see, please feel free to utilize the chat to ask questions, to make comments, to share a resource that you might be familiar with that is relevant to today's discussion. There will be a Q&A time at the end of the session where we can cover and answer some of the questions that come up in the chat. But I will monitor the chat during the webinar, and if something comes up that's relevant to the immediate discussion, I will ask the presenters to answer those questions before they complete their section of the presentation. You'll notice that also on your control panel, there's a materials section, and I just wanted to bring to your attention that that exists. There is located there a resource that was developed by the Effective Practices Work Group, may be of use to you. We will not be discussing it in relationship to today's webinar, but it is a resource that we want to be sure that you're familiar with. And it's the I'm STEM program evaluation rubric for determining, looking at equity in relationship to program development and implementation for STEM education that may be useful to those of you who are practitioners out in the field. I first of all would like to introduce you to the network for those of you who may be new to I'm STEM, or maybe you've been around for a while and this would be a good review. The mission and common agenda for this particular work is to broaden participation and close achievement gaps in grades 7 through 12 and undergraduate STEM education by scaling effective practices that close these gaps at the critical junctures that currently limit participation of underrepresented students in STEM pathways. This is a National Science Foundation, NSF includes, grant that NAEP has received, and we're working with the 6 Intermountain states, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, to, in a collective impact network approach to address this particular issue, and really looking at how do we engage those of you in the field in a way that you can learn from each other, share resources, share best practices, scale up effective practices, and all of this resulting in a more diverse STEM workforce. The way in which we're doing this work is through these 5 work groups. We have a steering committee that represents all 6 states, and they set direction around the project more broadly. But we also have these work groups who are involved in developing various resources, sharing strategies, addressing certain things. So the materials that I mentioned earlier at the opening was developed by the Effective Practice Scaling Work Group, the STEM Equity Program Evaluation Rubric. And there are some other resources that are being developed and will be released here this coming spring and summer. So there's a pilot asset map being built with the state of Nevada. We've done a data dashboard with the state of Idaho. And we have a monthly newsletter that goes out every month that is developed by the Communications and Resource Sharing Work Group. And you can sign up for that newsletter at the web address that's on the slide in front of you. So at napequity.org/I'mSTEM, there's a sign up on that particular page. And also when you sign up on the listserv, if you're at all interested in serving on any one of these work groups, you can also indicate that in your information as well. So without further ado, I don't want to keep us away from the work at hand. Let me open up today's I'mSTEM network meeting and introduce you to our three presenters. I'm going to present all three of them to you now so that they can get started on their presentations, and we'll be hearing from them in this order. So Brian Mitchell, directly from Nevada, is here with us, the Director of the Governor's Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology. And Brian serves on the steering committee for I'mSTEM, so he's been very involved in this work since its beginning. Our second presenter will be Dr. Michael Stanton, directly here from New Mexico. He's the Director of ECHO for Education at the University of New Mexico. And our final presenter is Sunshine Shepherd. Sunshine is from Idaho. She's the Site Director of the American Indian Services Prep program that's at Idaho State University. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton directly to Brian Mitchell and let Brian go ahead and take over and start his presentation. Brian?
Hi, Mimi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Brian.
All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time to join the call today. Hopefully what each of us share is useful to all of you. I'm Brian Mitchell, as Mimi said. I'm the Director of the Nevada Governor's Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology. And you can move to the next slide. Let me just share a little bit about our office. Our office is created within the Governor's Office, and we have three primary areas in which we work. The first is STEM education and STEM workforce development. So we lead various strategies, state-level strategies in those areas. The second, which I think is pretty related to broadband, or is pretty related to STEM in rural areas, is we are the state broadband office, and we work to increase broadband infrastructure and connectivity throughout the state, particularly in rural Nevada. And then finally, our office oversees efforts to grow graduate medical education programs within our state. So I'll probably hit very briefly on broadband as it relates to STEM education today, but we'll primarily focus on something that we're doing in Nevada to grow STEM education in the rural areas. So next slide. So I'm always interested in good ideas from other states. And so we recently created some regional STEM networks, and so let me kind of describe how those came about. So one of the things that I've been interested in is we needed a way to increase local engagement throughout the state on some of our statewide initiatives. And also we had a desire to build local ecosystems. I think in Nevada, we're a state where there were some pockets of excellence in STEM and some vast deserts of a lack of opportunity in STEM. And so being a small office, a small statewide office, we could only do so much and wanted to really grow our rules, particularly in the rural areas, the STEM ecosystems that we had. And And so, as I was looking around in other states for some of their efforts, I came across the idea of regional STEM networks. And back when I was doing my research, I found 12 different states that had regional STEM networks, and I've shown here 5 of them, kind of what those different networks look like. And there may be more today, but at least back then there were 12 of them. And I've summarized here on this slide some of the common themes I saw about what these networks were intended, or I guess what their job description was, so to speak, or what their missions were. The 5 that I've listed here were ones that resonated with me as being needs here in Nevada. So I'll just read some of these. Identifying on-the-ground programmatic gaps or implementation challenges in need of a state-level solution. And this, I think, is important that I'll go into in a little bit more detail here in a minute about how in Nevada we could be more aware of some of the challenges our rural areas in particular were facing, but also the students in our urban areas. So these STEM networks are also charged with growing interest in access to STEM in their region. And I'm sure all of you are the same way, but Nevada really is 3 different states located within one state. Clark County in Nevada, which is where Las Vegas is very, very, very different than even our other major urban area, which is the Reno area, culturally and in terms of the education assets and gaps, and certainly our rural areas are very different. And so, we knew that we needed individual strategies to be able to engage, particularly the underrepresented groups in STEM. Third, we wanted some on-the-ground, kind of boots on the ground in order to implement state-level programs. And then also identify best practices that might be worthy of scaling statewide. And then finally, I think we wanted to be able to help our different rural areas to be able to build better community partnerships. Next slide. So let me describe for you kind of the process of launching these regional STEM networks in Nevada. The first step in the process was creating the networks legislatively. In Nevada, we have a statutory body called our STEM Advisory Council, and this council is responsible for making recommendations to the legislature and the governor and other bodies about best practices in STEM. And so our recommendations that we sent to the legislature last year, one of the recommendations was for the creation of regional STEM networks and a small amount of funding to be able to launch the networks. And so those were included in SB 402, the appropriation to start the networks, and if those were unanimously passed by the members of the legislature and signed by the governor. So we wanted to create 3 different regions. I know some of the other states had more, and it was my thought that it would be difficult. It would have been difficult to fund more than 3 regions, and so. But at the same time, we really have 3 regions of the state where there's rural areas. Clark County is a major urban area in the south, and then an urban area in the north. And certainly the rural areas in Nevada are very different even from each other. But that's about, part of, I guess, the art of politics, knowing what's possible and not shooting for too much. And so once we had our legislation passed and our appropriation in hand, my office set up a competitive solicitation, 3 competitive solicitations for the regional STEM networks. And we ran each solicitation independently, and any organization was eligible to apply. And we really prioritized, among other things, equity as one of the key deliverables of each of the network sponsors. And so we had, I was very pleased, we had competitive applications in each of the 3 regions in competition. And ultimately, these were reviewed by a committee made up of members of the STEM Council, and we selected there was one entity that applied in each of the 3 regions, the Desert Research Institute, which is a member of a part of our Nevada system of higher education, and they were chosen to be the sponsor in each of the 3 networks. And I think I think that's been very good so far. There's a lot of synergy that they are able to, to have by having a single entity managing all 3. And so each of the 3 networks will receive $100,000 per year per network. So the process for then setting up the networks, we included funding for staff, so each network has a network director, and then there's also funding for grants, or for which I'll get into in just a second. And then we're also working with the other applicants that did not receive, or that were not selected to, because a lot of them had some very interesting ideas that I think will be valuable for us to implement. So next slide. All right, so these are some of the essential activities that the networks are going to do, and I want to focus a little bit on the rural network and some of the things that I think will be valuable activities over the next 18 months. Particularly in the rural areas, I think we don't have just because they're so vast and there's so many different communities with such different needs, we don't have a good idea for, in many places, what's out there and what the needs are. And so the regional, the rural regional network will spend a lot of time doing asset mapping and gap analysis and working with different stakeholders to figure out what's there, and then work with the stakeholders to set up regional STEM goals. The pilot, expand, or scale up refers to the funding that we have to solicit applications for funding, essentially, and we will invite applicants to either apply for money to either pilot good ideas to expand interest and awareness in STEM, or they could expand an existing initiative within the region, or scale up across regions, good ideas. And then obviously we want to be able to measure our success so that we can go back to our legislature and continue to ask for funds to sustain these networks. Next slide. So a lot of Nevada looks like, a lot of rural Nevada looks just like this picture, so I thought it was pretty appropriate. So the initial plans of these networks have been thus far to establish regional advisory committees that are made up of members of K-12 schools, higher ed, nonprofit, or informal education, and then business, and also government. And so these regional advisory committees will be responsible for developing regional goals and strategic plans to help provide individual direction for the different regions. We're also planning on holding later this summer, hopefully we'll be able to do this, and hopefully the coronavirus will be at bay by then, holding regional STEM summits that will bring together all the stakeholders from each of the regions in order to provide feedback and input on these different goals and plans that the advisory committees have put together. In the rural region, we're planning on holding our summit in a town called Eureka, which is very close to the geographic center of Nevada and is a fantastic mining community that I think will be a great host for the summit. One of the other things that we are working on is engaging our tribal nations. In Nevada, we have 27 sovereign tribal nations that are spread throughout the states. We have 2 nations that are located in very urban areas, and then we also have tribal nations that are located in extreme rural areas, and they have very different needs. And so I think each of the 3 networks, but particularly this rural network, will have a focus on making sure that our tribal, the kids that go to school in tribal nations are not left behind, and are able to experience the kind of STEM education that we get in the best schools in our urban areas. We also want to help these rural cities and towns be able to share what works between them. And let me give you one quick example. Two of our small towns have wonderful STEM festivals each year that bring together the entire community to showcase what students have done and to provide feedback on some of their STEM projects. And I think this is an example of something where if we can share this with the other rural cities and towns, we may be able to expand STEM engagement and increase business and school partnerships. All right, next slide. All right, so I don't want this to just be a presentation about what we're doing in Nevada, but I also want you to think about how you can take some of these ideas and modify them to work in your state. So a couple of things to think about perhaps are how you can, do you know what's going on in your rural areas and or what kind of things that they lack? And also maybe perhaps think about putting together some rural stakeholders to create a STEM ecosystem and to create a STEM community. Oftentimes when I come to these presentations like this, I say, well, that doesn't apply to Nevada because our legislature would never fund something like this, or that doesn't work because of this or that. And so I hope that you're able to take something that I've presented today and be able to then apply that in your rural in the rural areas of your state, whether it's putting together committees or thinking through doing some different regional goals and bringing together some stakeholders to be able to plan those things out. So I'm happy to take questions at the very end, but now we'll pass the baton over to Mike from New Mexico.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear and see me.
You're right on, Michael. Go for it.
Okay, great. Anyway, I just want to wish my very best to all of us in education right now. These are challenging times indeed, but I think it's also a great time of opportunity to explore and become community in some unique ways. My presentation is about using technology to support virtual communities of practice in some very innovative ways. So I'd like to share with you what we've developed here in New Mexico over the last 3 years and some of our plans for the very not so distant future. May come a little bit more close as our challenges continue to rise. If you can go ahead and advance, please, Mimi. I don't know how many of you have heard of Project ECHO, but we are out of the University of New Mexico at the Health Sciences Center. The very simple origin story is about 16, 17 years ago, the gastroenterologist specialist at our Health Sciences Center, and as you know, New Mexico is a very very rural state with our one major institution for medicine. And he was the specialist, especially in hepatitis C disease. And if folks living in a different city, any town in the New Mexico, went to their practitioner to kind of get try to get a diagnosis, they were sent to Albuquerque and to Dr. Aurora's clinic. And they'd have to wait months, then they'd have to be seen and then come back monthly to get the treatment. Dr. Aurora said there's a better way by leveraging technology to really increase the workforce capacity of his peers and the other doctors and practitioners in these and primary care doctors in these other remote clinics, medical clinics. So he really shared his expertise and best practices to help train up these doctors, and then really reducing the disparities of access to good treatment for those patients. And he did it in a hub and spoke model. He brought these practitioners together every 2 weeks, and they met, and he gave a 20-minute workshop and training about how to diagnose and treat. And then they would have another few minutes to ask questions and to bring up their own cases. And after 4 years and follow-up, it was realized that those patients out there outside of Dr. Aurora's clinic survived and did as well or better than coming to see him directly. So long story short, so now there are 80 echo medical networks all around the world in 17 countries, thousands of practitioners, mostly in the medical field. But now, just in the last few years, it's transposed into the field of education. In fact, our friends, partners at the University of Wyoming in their Center for Disabilities were the pioneers to move the medical echo model into the field of education to help improve workforce capacity and educators. And as you can see here, ECHO provides this virtual community of practice for folks in the field, in remote and rural and isolated communities to access experts. We realize that especially in our Western states that expertise is there, but it's not easy to get to, either by having our teachers go to a site for training, especially in these times where travel and large groups are locked down, or to have experts come to them. And oftentimes, although this kind of webinar format works well, it doesn't always work as well in that same two-way kind of model. So the idea of a virtual collaborative community of practice is something that ECHO is really it's the secret sauce of ECHO, and I'd like to show what that looks like, and then begin to demonstrate for you or show some of our future plans of how this could evolve into more specific networks, especially in STEM education here in New Mexico, and an offer for you all in your communities as well. Mimi, if you could change. So the ECHO model uses technology to leverage scarce resources using Zoom video technology, and so that the one practitioner or group of experts can share their best practices without having to travel and people traveling to them. And using in those sharing of best practices, often, not always, is in bite-sized chunks of 15 to 20 minute webinar, or not webinars, but presentations and slides, much like what we're doing here with questions and answers. But then the other part of an ECHO session is what we call case-based learning, constructivist learning, collaborative problem solving to help master the complexity. And we in adult education that specialize in adult learning theory realize that this is how we as adults learn best. We learn in small bite-sized chunks, and we also learn when we're together in a collaborative group, most often working on problem solving and doing our own research and finding. And these are two key elements of ECHO education networks. And then we use web-based tools to monitor our outcomes. Next. And if you could just kind of push through here, you can kind of see another visual of what ECHO communities of practice look like. Specialists are at the hub or central location, and oftentimes that central location could be virtual. When I have my ECHO sessions, my specialists are not always there right in the room with me. They're oftentimes virtual in other parts of the city, state, or even the country. And we realize in education networks that those 25, 30, 15, 25, 30 participants in what we call spokes around, or schools or classrooms around the state, they're directly involved and engaged. But we also realize that the impact of these virtual communities of practice, our educators are then sharing what they've learned with their principals the next day, in their own professional learning communities, in their lunchroom, so other professionals in their community, in their local learning community are being impacted. And obviously, it's trickling down very well into students. So they love the collaboration. They love that it's every 2 weeks they're able to log in and be part of ongoing professional learning. So it's timely. These are relevant topics that they've asked for. The mini lessons are based on their requests, and those case-based discussions really become the most exciting time where people can provide a question of a challenging dilemma. And then they love the collegiality of being able to expand their professional network beyond their own local school. Continue. So we began with our pilot in school year 2018, actually in January of 2018, with our first Echo for Education network. And it was built around the driving question of how can we improve. You know, I will admit that our state has the worst graduation rate of anybody in the virtual room today, and the lowest in the country. So that became our focus. How can we improve our graduation rate, knowing what we know what works, which is in our state career technical education programs. Students who are what we call concentrators in CTE programs are graduating 17, 18 points higher. So that was the focus of our inaugural ECHO network. Next. And so our participants were those teacher leaders, a principal, counselors, and I was a founding principal of an innovative high school, magnet high school in Albuquerque. It was that person that the principal would send to go get training, and instead of traveling and finding a substitute, they were able to sit and get and participate. So we began with workshops, and we had 35 different specialists that we were able to bring in and present innovative practices, new resources, and in a variety of fashion, most often in 15-minute presentations. Next. And then the second part of our ECHO network was focused around what we call the case-based learning, constructivist learning, collaborative problem solving. Given the opportunity, presenters, participants were given the opportunity to present a particular case or challenging dilemma. At first, we thought in our plan it might be about a student or a group of students they were worried about, much like the medical area where they were presenting patients. But very quickly, very quickly, and really constantly, the presentations have been built around problems of practice or how to implement a new intervention or a new program, like a STEM pathway program, for example. But the theme of this, or the motto of this session of ECHO Education Networks, is all teach and all learn, because the recommendations that are generated after those questions are brought up by the participant, most often some of the best recommendations come from other participants, not necessarily the experts, but other participants in other places around the state. Next. So after our second year, last year, school year 2019, we've really collected some strong data and evidence that's valid, statistically valid and relevant, that there is really a strong potential for long-term impact in scaling up to other networks, and that the participants really preferred this type of model, certainly over webinars, but also even face-to-face, since they weren't able to be involved in as much face-to-face PD as they would hoped. This was a great strategy for them. And it was cost effective. They didn't have to get a sub, get babysitters, coverage for their families, and more importantly, it increased the educators' self-efficacy. They felt that their knowledge, their expertise in these subjects rose, in a very important and strong way. Next. So, with 3 years, we're finishing up our third year of ECHO Networks, and yes, we held it Tuesday, and even though all of the schools in New Mexico are closed, we still had pretty strong turnout of our practitioners because they love being part of that community of practice. And in doing so, we realized that there's many more opportunities, and certainly in the area of STEM education. So again, before many things have been put on hold, we're in the process of planning. Hopefully the funding will still be there as things settle out in the weeks and months to come, to create a new ECHO network here in New Mexico, built around STEM education, especially for STEM teachers and practitioners and specialists in the schools, educators in the schools around computer science, and then also in information and information technology, but also in the health sciences as well. So we're hoping to plan, and we're feeling hopeful that we'll be able to have 2 new ECHO networks next year that are more focused on educators, practitioners in our schools and sites around New Mexico, around this area of computer science and health. And because their knowledge and their these are still new pathway programs and courses that they're trying to implement, and being able, and they're most often isolated. They're the only teacher of that kind in their particular school district oftentimes. So having this collaboration is very important, and continuing their professional development. Next. So you can kind of see very briefly in this overview of what our plans are. Our hub team would be the guest experts and specialists, and you can see a number of folks that we have lined up that are all partners, being able to share their expertise in this unique way. Our virtual workshops are going to be a variety of subjects for our CS and IT ECHO, and then the presentations of challenges from the field, from our participants, we expect to be very, to be varied and important to all of them. We really are hopeful, and you all are the experts, because if you were, I don't know how many of you are here in New Mexico, but if you are, I really hope you reach out to me, my contact information, so that when this does become a reality, fingers crossed, this summer and fall, we can include you as part of this. And go ahead and turn to the next slide. And to the rest of you in Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, please consider Utah, please consider communicating with me, because one of my other roles here at ECHO Institute, besides facilitating ECHO networks here in New Mexico, is to work with partners, what we call affiliated partners, because we are giving away this model at no cost. Yes, we are giving away this model at no cost. So if you are, say, at the University of, or the governor's office in Nevada, and you would like to start an ECHO network, or you're in a special organization in Idaho, or you're part of a college or university center, there's some wonderful opportunities, and I'm here to help you connect with that and make that a reality for you, if that's what you would like. So I've got my contact information there. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I will be available for a couple questions at the end as well. So I would like to introduce my colleague, Sunshine, from Idaho, and I'm looking forward to hearing her presentation as well. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I can't see.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Awesome, thanks Mimi. Thank you, Michael, for that presentation. And I am excited to be here today. Like you've heard, my name is Sunshine Shepherd. I am a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes from Fort Hall, Idaho. I'm the site director for the American Indian Services Pre-Freshman Engineering Program. It is held at Idaho State University in the Rendezvous building and throughout the university campus. Wherever we can go and take the students on campus, we try to do that also, as well as promoting STEM education. Next slide. So what is PrEP? AIS, American Indian Services, is a scholarship foundation based in Salt Lake City. They are a 501c3 nonprofit in Salt Lake. Like I said, they provide scholarships to Native American students all over the world. Undergraduate students have the ability to apply for their scholarships, and they give scholarships to students who attend over 400 colleges and universities and trade schools. The creation of American Indian Services Prep program was kind of a branch off of the AIS Scholarship Foundation and the things that they do with their undergraduate students. They were realizing that a lot of these students were getting these scholarships, going on to college for the first semester, second semester, and then having a hard time and kind of dropping off. And we were trying to figure out what was the issue. Why do we have students who are starting out going to school and not finishing? And Sylvia McMallen is the person who oversees the AIS Prep, and she realized that we need to start reaching out to these students when they're younger and trying to kind of get them into a pathway to success so that they feel supported from middle school all the way through the undergraduate degree and have the support and things that they need to continue and get their education and get those degrees. So AIS Prep is a free summer STEM program for middle school students. So we figured start in middle school and start getting them knowing people, figuring out what to do, seeing themselves in the STEM field, and start thinking about college, because at that age, a lot of times students aren't thinking about college. So what AIS Prep does is it provides 3 summers of rigorous academic instruction in the field of STEM. So we have hands-on projects, homework assignments that are challenging to the students, and daily career speakers and lectures. Prep is academically demanding, so we try to make sure to give all of the resources that we can to these students who are going home where they may not have that support, and I'll talk more about that later on in the presentation. You can go on to the next slide. So before I talk about the locations, I wanted to just say that some things that we have to keep into perspective, at least about our program, because we're working with mainly Native American students. We do let any student who's interested apply and be involved with prep, but 1 in 3 Native American students live in poverty. So that's already a challenge on its own, dealing with these students and trying to help them to be successful and get the resources that they need. Also, only 53 to 67% of Native American students even finish high school, and more than 60% of U.S. high school students go on to college, while only 17% of Native American students are able to continue after and go on to college. So prep, we have 6 locations. We try to put them either near our reservation or on a reservation, and our emphasis is recruiting Native American students, underrepresented students, minority students. So we try to gear our recruiting efforts to those students so they kind of feel like they're being chosen, they're being picked out. You know, a lot of times many of the students that I work with are only called to the office if they're getting in trouble or they're being sent home or there's a list of issues. So when I show up and we're recruiting them for AIS, you're a student that we see would have a potential of going into the STEM field, and being involved in a program like this, it really helps the students to feel like there is a place for them. So we have those places for prep in Blanding, Utah, which is the first. They've gone for 5 years. I think this is their 6th year. Gallup, New Mexico, Tuba City, Pine Ridge, South Dakota on the Hopi Reservation, and then here in Pocatello, Idaho. In 2019, we served 315 students, and we're projecting to serve 400 this year, and each year that grows because each year there's a new cohort of students. You can go to the next slide. So how the program works, and it's worked really well for us. Blanding, like I said, is in their 5th year. Pocatello, we're in our 2nd year, and our 1st year was pretty successful. The students loved it. We had 47 students apply. We were hoping to have 50 students, so we were pretty close there. And then we had 37 students who graduated from the program at the end of the 6 weeks. And the reason we had students dropping off was we have an attendance policy, so a lot of times if the students are going to miss a week or 2, then they just stop coming because they're missing so much of the curriculum that we have. So that was there was like football camps and things like that came up that some of the students just weren't able to finish out prep. But first, we start with in the morning from 9 to 10 is the daily career speakers. So every day, Monday through Thursday from 9 to 10, the students are given a notebook where they're able to take notes and ask questions, put any kind of facts or things that were interesting to them from the presentations. These presenters are industry professionals and university faculty, Native scientists, Native American students that are in the STEM field at the university or at any other university. I also try to put in there some distance presenting, so we do Skype a scientist. Sometimes we show them some videos, how-to videos on YouTube, anything that pertains to sciences, and this gives them the opportunity to see people who look like them or are from their community and they're in the STEM field. So hopefully that gives them the motivation or a spark of interest where they start asking questions about science and how they can get into those career fields or go into college and be in those degrees. So also we do soft skills and life skills. As I'll talk about later, there's a lot of challenges. And so a lot of these students come from homes where they're lacking support, but not only academically, they're also lacking support mentally and emotionally. Some of these students aren't able to figure out how to make good decisions or solve conflicts with their friends. Just simple things like that. We're realizing that these students aren't getting those trainings as well as some of the STEM and academic trainings that they're missing. So we try to throw in soft skills and life skills throughout the week also. We do like little lessons with them, especially pertaining to whatever issues we have going on with prep at the time, because we are working with middle school students. So each week and every day is different. Some of the things and reasons that these students, I think, aren't getting these skills at home is because a lot of times they come from homes where they're raised by not their parents, but someone else in their family, a grandparent. And a lot of times this is due to historical trauma, Native American history, and how that affects our generation today. Not only me, but these students that are being raised by grandparents who have been through so much in the past that it's hard for them to figure out and navigate how to teach these students all the right skills that they need to be successful in their daily life, not only their education. Also, the courses that we take are pretty challenging. Like I said, the first year students take engineering, problem solving, and logic. The second year students, which will be, I have a second year this year, will be taking physics, problem solving 2, and algebra. And the third year students take computer science, probability and stats, and algebraic structures. So when I'm choosing the teachers that are coming in and professors, I'm looking for that. For people who come from the community, I know we have a lot of people within our reservation here that are fully capable of teaching those to these students, and having them be able to come in and the kids see them and know who they are and haven't seen them at ceremonies and seen them at the gas station and the trading post, grocery store. It really means a lot to these students to see that their people are going out and they're getting these degrees and they're able to come back and teach them. And eventually that might be them, so it does spark that interest in them. Next slide. Some of the challenges that I've seen, it's really nice through the presentation, you kind of see all the different levels of running a STEM program and working with students in rural communities. And I feel like my presentation is more boots on the ground kind of presentation. I'm given a curriculum, I'm given a job to do, and then I go out and I execute it. I find the students, I find the instructors and professors, and so I'm daily dealing with the challenges that these students are facing. And coming from the reservation myself, I'm able to relate to these students and try to figure out ways to help them to be successful and to be there for them and support them, whether that be through transportation, which is one of our biggest issues. When I was recruiting many of the students, they were saying that they couldn't come because there's no way that they could get to the campus. And a lot of them come from homes that don't even have a car. So how could they get out there? So one of the really cool things with AIS Prep is we have on our rural locations, we have a bus if needed. So I let them know that that was something that our site needed, and we had a bus here before prep started. So we have pick up and drop off spots in each of the locations where we have majority of the students. So we have a pickup in Blackfoot, a pickup in Timby Hall, and also in Timby Hall, the students, in Fort Hall at Timby Hall, the students are able to have breakfast there. So we work with some of the other programs and the resources that they already have for the students. And then we bring the students up to ISU and we take them home each day. So that was one of the big transportation issues. Last year, we did have a student who was walking, I want to say like at least 1.5 miles before I realized that I saw him walking and I'm like, where is your sister? I thought she was bringing you. And she just decided not to bring him anymore. But he was so dedicated to coming that he walked the whole way by himself. And once I found out, I didn't let that happen anymore. But he didn't want to tell us. He was embarrassed. He wanted to be there. He knew that there was a bus stop and stuff, but he couldn't even get to the bus stop. So he would walk as far as he could. And he was late every day that he was walking. And finally, I pulled him aside and I just kind of asked what was going on. And he let me know that he lives with his sister with 6 other siblings that are younger than him, and he's in 6th grade. So just imagine the stress of his older sister. And so we found a route that we could go around and pick him up so that he wouldn't have to do that anymore. So we try to figure out what the challenges are to these students and how that we can solve them and help them so that they're not stressed and figuring things out for themselves at such a young age. Technology, that's a huge one for me. Even living on the reservation, I have bad phone signal and I have no internet. So these students also come from areas where they're not able to access or even get internet. So we try to make sure we do everything on campus. Their homework, everything that they do is done there so that they aren't having to go home and try to figure out how to get their homework and stuff done with no resources. So that's a big one. Technology. Generational disparities. Many of our prep students are raised, like I said, by family members other than their parents. And I have a few stories where when I was recruiting, the only way that I was able to reach my numbers and to find all those students that were interested was to go meet the parents at their jobs, to go meet them at the gas station. When I first was talking about this program, it was crazy that people, to me, it was just what I do. It wasn't anything different, but I would just go and meet like one of the kids, his grandma. She really wanted him to be involved. She wants him to be successful. She wants him to go to school. He gets good grades, everything. And she just didn't know how to fill out the application. She wasn't sure how to understand and read what I was giving her. And I tried to make the application 3 pages. Nothing hard, where we can figure it out together. As long as I get the student signed up, then later I can deal with the paperwork and getting all the information that I need. But I just needed the student to commit and have the parent or guardian committing also. So I would meet the grandmas at the gas station. We would sit outside and figure out the application together, and I would help them fill it out so that they could have that done. They don't have to stress and worry about it, and their student could come into the program. And I would assure them that we would have everything for these students. A lot of times the students aren't able to get food or get clothes, so why would they be able to get school supplies, especially for the summer? So our AIS program, we also give the students all of the school supplies that they need, all of the snacks, water bottles, shirts, everything and anything that they would need, we provide to them. So that's another big issue. Trauma I have on there. The students are coming from homes of, a lot of times there's alcohol and drug related issues. They're raised in trauma and a lot of problems where sometimes they're not even sure why they would even want to get an education. From students that I've talked to, why would I want to go on to school? I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to get through high school and graduate. I'm trying to help raise my little 2-year-old sister, so these students already are going through so much that a lot of times that's what's hard for them to get involved in these programs, is they don't have the support or even the self-motivation to do that. We can go on to the next slide. Some more challenges that I see with our prep program is a lack of understanding from parents, but also from the students. A lot of the stuff, logic, many of our kids are behind their grade level, and so they have a hard time even figuring out what they're doing at school, so they have a hard time understanding what we're teaching them. We do offer a lot of tutoring and outside help for the students so that they're able to get that support before they even go home, because going home and having someone to help you with logic is not going to be easy. So at the end of the day, we put that last 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever the students need, to help them with their homework and help them to stay on track so that they're not having to take homework home that they're not able to get help with, which also goes into the lack of support. Sometimes it isn't the parent's fault. Sometimes the parent just doesn't really know how to support their student. And if they weren't raised or taught about education or higher education, or how important it is to have a career and get a degree, and how are they supposed to teach that to their student? And so it's a lot of confusion between the student and the parent. Cultural differences. Some of the things that go on within STEM programs don't take into respect or account cultural beliefs and traditions. So we have students who they can't touch a snake, they can't dissect a pig, or touch a piece of anything that's dead. So those kind of cultural differences are really hard for students when they feel like they're going against their culture, but they're also having to put their education first. So being torn between the two is really hard for some of the students to continue if they don't feel like their culture is respected, because that's where they come from and that's who they are. So we try and prep to make sure that we're always sensitive and respectful to the different tribes that we have, and then also to include culture. So we want these students to learn about the different plants, and we want them to learn about what their ancestors did and how a lot of the things that they do as a culture and as we do in our upbringing is science and can be characterized as science. Another, I know my time's running up, lack of Native Americans in the sciences, so students don't see themselves in these positions, so it's hard for them to continue and give their all if they don't see themselves in those areas. Like I said before, lack of soft and life skills. You can go to the next slide. I guess I can just finish with, I had a lot of narratives and stories about things that and challenges that we go through and I see with our prep students, but that doesn't mean that they're not successful. They try really hard. They get up early in the morning, catch that bus, and get to school, and they try their best even when they struggle and even when they don't understand. So some of the things that we do and we have found as best practices are just giving unlimited support to the student, but also to their family. So I try as much as I can to keep the family involved in all of the process, whether it be behavior issues at prep, field trips, ideas of cultural teachings that we can bring in. So just giving that support to the student and the parents, the family, the guardians, whoever's taking care of that student. And then also communicating, that's one way, understanding and taking into respect and account their own lives and the things that they're going through. A big one for me is community buy-in. I'm from this reservation, I'm from this tribe, so it's easy for me. I know the grandmas and grandpas, I know the moms, I know a lot of the situations that these students are in personally, so it's really easy for me to go in and or even go to a house and be able to recruit a student or ease the parents' questions or the grandparent. So that's a really big one for me, is finding people within your community who can go out and be trusted. Which is the next one, trust from the community and from the family. A lot of these parents only let their student come because they do trust me and they know that I have the best interest in mind for all these students and I want what's best for them. And they see me as a Master's of Public Administration graduate student at Idaho State and see that this is what I want for their kids and I want better for our future and I'll do what I can to help them. So having that trust is really, really important. And then the last one is we do like cultural sensitivity trainings for our staff. I try to hire Native American staff, but sometimes we get people who aren't from the reservation or from the university, and I try to make sure that they are inclusive and respectful of all cultural issues that we might run into. So sorry, Mimi, I know I took my time up. I left my information. If you guys have questions, want to reach out to me. And there's also an AIS Prep video about one of our sites. Thanks.
Sunshine, listen, I am so impressed by your dedication to the work that you're doing. And Brian and Michael, all of you, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. And look at these great kids. All of us, whether we're doing this work at a state level, whether we're doing this work trying to reach communities and bring them together virtually, or as Sunshine was just sharing with us, as she said, the grassroots. These are the kinds of faces that we're looking for to get into STEM education. So these are all just fantastic and wonderful examples. I know we've had a lot of sort of chatter going on the chat box, and I don't think I missed any questions that happened to pop up, but I want to just be sure that you're all aware of the fact that the presenters are all more than willing to talk with you, to discuss the programs that they're involved in more detail, to answer any additional questions you might have. So please feel free to reach out to them at any time, or to me if you need to find more information about NAEP, and we'll be more than happy to get this, connect you with the presenters as well. Again, save the date for the next network meeting. It'll be Thursday, May 21st at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. You'll receive information about it, of course, into your inbox. And when you leave today's webinar, you should get a pop-up window with an evaluation for the webinar today. It will also show up in your email. Please complete the evaluation. This helps us a lot as we move forward in creating additional network meeting agendas and other activities for the IM STEM network. Hope you enjoyed today's presentations. Today's presentation, the recording will be posted online at napequity.org/IMSTEM.